Hey, Taylor here, and welcome back to another session of Pellet Tech 101. Today I have a QuadraFire control box. This is the 3-speed QuadraFire control board or control box, and this is used in a number of QuadraFire's pellet stoves. So this particular control board is going to be used in the 1200 series, so that's the 1200 freestanding and the 1200 insert. It will also be used on the Contour model, the cast steel freestanding and cast steel insert, as well as the Santa Fe and the Santa Fe insert model. So it's used for a variety of stoves, and when you get the control board, it needs to be set up prior to installing it in your stove. So we're just going to kind of go through the basics on that. As the control board comes, it'll be in a protective packaging. It will come with some instructional pamphlets, sheets here, so it is important to keep these, to go over these. This is just designed to be kind of a visual reference if needed. You will also find that it comes with a couple of wires inside of it, which are thermocouple grounding wires. So the instructions will give you indication of what we need to do here with these, but it is important that the thermocouple that's in your QuadraFire is grounded properly. So in the event that you have an earlier unit that does not have the ground in place for the thermocouple, they do include these with the control board, so we can make sure that we get that 100%. So essentially, as I look at the control board here, this particular control board is going to replace the previous digital control boards for QuadraFire, at least for the 3-speed model. The original Mount Vernon will actually have a 4-speed control board. It looks similar to this, but the setup of that one is different. So if you need instructions on that or need a link to that, just comment in the video here. We're happy to provide assistance on the 4-speed board. But for right now, we want to just kind of cover the basics on the 3-speed. So the actual installation of the board is pretty simple. We have our main electronic strip, which is going to insert into the junction box. Obviously, anytime that we're working with the electrical on the stove, we want to make sure that it's unplugged from the wall. So that is super important. But we do want to get the control board set up correctly based on the model that we have. So what we have over here is we have a small dial, and I'm doing kind of a zoom in close up so you can get a better look at this dial. But essentially the dial has a range all the way from 0 to 7. So as it comes from the factory, this is going to be set at a 0. Now the 0 mode is what we call a diagnostic mode. So it's essentially a way that we can kind of test some of the componentry that's in the stove. The pamphlet right here will give you a further explanation on the diagnostic, and if you need to do that, what you need to do to prep for that. But that's how it will come. So it's important to note that the stove will not operate correctly. Doesn't matter which model you have, the way that the control board comes out of the box. So it is important that we go ahead and that we take a look at the instructional sheet and that we make sure that we're setting this dial based on the stove that I have. So as we look at the 1 and the 2, and again, I'm just using a small flathead. You could use a precision flathead, but this is just a plastic dial inside here that I'm turning. So as we look at the number 1 and the number 2 settings, those are going to be used for the 1200 and the 1200i. As we look at the 4 and 5 settings that are on here, 4 and 5, those are going to be used for the Contour model. And then as we look at the 6 and the 7, the 6 and the 7 are going to be used on the Santa Fe freestanding and insert and the cast steel freestanding and insert. So it is very important that we set this correctly based on the model that we have. You should have the owner's manual for the stove, which will give you indication of which model you have. If you're unclear on which model you have, you can always comment in the video here. We're happy to assist. You can simply take a picture of your stove and we're happy to let you know which model that you have so you can set the control board up correctly based on that. Once we have this set correctly and we plug it into the stove, it is going to give us a series of blinks. So I'm just going to go ahead and get this back set to 0. But it will give us a series of blinks, and it's important that we pay attention to that. So it's going to be a blue blink that comes out of the control board here, and that blink sequence will indicate that we do have it set up correctly based on the model. So once we have it set, another way to verify is just to watch those blue blinks. pay attention to the instructional sheet here that came with it, and we can make sure that it's set up correctly based on the model that you have. Let's see here. Also wanted to mention, like I said, there is essentially 2 notches or 2 available positions that I can have based on the model. Now, like I mentioned, the 1200 series is going to be a 1 and a 2, and the Contour is going to be a 4 and a 5, and then the Castile and the Santa Fe is going to be a 6 and a 7. So the secondary setting for each one of these models is basically an increase of 10%. So the increase of 10% is actually with the fuel feed in the unit. For the most part, the normal settings are correct and where this needs to be. However, sometimes folks will find an issue, or maybe they're burning a particular pellet that's denser than others, maybe it's longer than others, and they want more fuel to be feeding into that fire pot. So that is essentially the +10 adjustment that I can make for any one of those models that this fits, is to increase that rate of feed by 10%. Again, average pellets, average installations, situations, scenarios, you're going to want to leave that at just the standard setting. But you do have some adjustment there. If you ever did need to readjust this once it's put in the stove, just make sure that you have the stove off, cool down, unplug it from the wall, and then go ahead and make the necessary adjustment right here with the control board, install it back in, and fire it back up. It is important when installing that our main electronic sleeve here, or our receptor, our indicator on the control board, is securely plugged into the junction box. So I always tell people it's important not to force anything. This actually should go in pretty easy, but the best way to do it is just to give it a small wiggle. Pay attention to the way that the old board came out. Again, this one may look a little bit different than your existing control board, depending on the age of your stove. However, once that old board is out, we simply just want to slide this in, and as you give it a gentle wiggle back and forth, you'll feel it lock all the way down in place. The last thing that I wanted to mention here with the control board is going to be the blinking lights. So I'm just actually going to use this here for a reference. So our Thermocouple light. So in the past, there would be a kind of a green and a red light that would run independently. And with this newer style board here, what it will do is that internal light will be green when the thermocouple has reached 200 degrees, and then that light will turn red once that thermocouple has reached 600 degrees. So it's just kind of a proof within the thermocouple right here of how that works compared to an existing board. And then the thermocouple light will actually kind of turn an amber, and it'll flash 3 times if there's an issue, and kind of repeat that process. So if there's an issue with the thermocouple, you're going to see an amber blink from that thermocouple light. If there is an issue and you do see that blink, first thing to do is obviously just give a physical inspection to that thermocouple, make sure that it's secured correctly and properly, and then also just pull off the cover that's on the thermocouple, make sure that it's properly over the fire pot, everything looks good with it, and put it back on. If you're still having issues once everything is checked over and seeing that blinking amber light, would probably be an indication that the thermocouple itself needs to be replaced. That's about it on the Quadra-Fire 3-speed control board here. Again, any questions, any assistance that's needed, please leave a comment below the video here. We're always happy to assist and make sure everything's 100%. So thanks again for joining us for another session of Pellet Tech 101, and we'll see you soon.